Hi there, and welcome to Warhammer Inquires, the probable lore question series for the wide universe of Warhammer. Tired of lore channels being long-winded? Just need some quick dirty lore for something that caught your interest. New to the 30,000 or 40,000 space? Then I am the man you need. And in today's episode, we have a simple, yet complex topic. Autoguns, stubbers, and of course, you. Well, technically not you, it just flows well. Now, if you're smart, then it'll click that autoguns and stubbers are the same thing. I mean, it's just different terms for the same concept, that being regular firearms in Warhammer, right? I'm afraid to burst your bubble, or rather blow a bubble in your face, but this isn't true. To a certain extent. Let's start off easy. Autoguns. The name should clue you in, but this is a general terminology for any automatic firearm. We have the autoguns that you'd be most familiar with, that being the pistol and rifle. Loathed as I am to cite Dark Tide, you'd recognize them there as a potential weapon choice for your Nurgle cleansing needs. Is it that simple? Yes, it is. However, here comes the key thing, my dear viewer. Autoguns use caseless ammunition primarily, which makes them different from our real-life firearms to an extent. Caseless ammunition, as you could guess from the name, does not spit out a case or cartridge, whereas standard ammunition requires the presence of an ejection port and spits out a spent casing. If you are really interested, check out this video by Forgotten Weapons, otherwise known as Gun Jesus, or take a deep dive into the wonderful woes of Deutsch engineering yourself. That's German, by the way. Though you will notice I said they used caseless ammunition to a certain extent, because they are very capable of using cased or standard cartridges. Granted, it's not one-to-one with our real-world ammo types, but it gives you an idea. You'll see this prominently within Darktide, loathed as I am to cite it, again, with its autoguns all having an ejection port and spitting out what I assume to be brass casings. So let us chalk it up to Warhammer firearms being capable of using both types of ammunition. Personally, I err on the side of caseless ammunition because I just really like the G11, but I can understand the joy of walking through a sea of spent brass casings, whilst taking ground from any foes. Another thing is that firearms are a universal staple within Warhammer itself. An obvious statement, again, to a certain extent. You might be asking, why don't we see more usage of autoguns or mentions? The humble lasgun fulfills all the shortcomings of solid projectile weapons, which is what the autogun is part of. But if that is the case, then why are they still produced? You guessed it, technological restrictions. The Imperium is large and expensive, and the most advanced stuff is meant mostly for the front line. You'll most often see standard firearms within the hands of a planetary defense force, otherwise known as PDF. Because it is simply much cheaper to produce, both in terms of the gun itself and its ammunition, as well as gangers and scum who also use it, but you probably already knew that. Because in the grim, dark future, things are worse, but mostly the same on occasion. Standard firearms are cheap, easy to maintain, and, should some effort be put in, rugged, reliable, and can get the job done. Remember, my dear viewer, volume of fire can sway the odds into your favor, because armor will ultimately falter if you keep hitting it enough. Now, you might be wondering what the difference between autoguns and stub-guns are. If you remember earlier in the intro, I said, it's just different terms for the same concept, right? This is where things get complicated, because autoguns mainly refer to automatic weapons, to repeat myself, and stub-guns generally refer to semi-automatic weapons, that is to say, weapons not capable of automatic fire. But two exceptions exist to a certain extent. Now, what classifies as stub-guns, firstly? Pistols, revolvers, hand cannons, and lever actions, to name a few, that you'd be most familiar with. If it requires you to pull the trigger multiple times, then it's semi-auto, whereas automatic you keep the trigger pulled down or depressed for continuous fire, being autoguns. Stub pistols and revolvers are a common sight, because keeping something small and compact for safety's sake is always a good thing in Warhammer. They work just like our regular life firearms, to repeat myself, again. Though here is where we get into a point of contention, because one type of revolver will cause you headaches, and that is the Kellermorph from the 8th edition Genestealer Cult Codex. It's a specialized unit. In specific, its main weapon, the Liberator Auto Stub or Auto Stubs. Now, I had to do a bit of digging here to figure out if Warhammer has fully automatic revolvers because it had seemed like a bit of fun sci-fi nonsense for it to include. Unfortunately for the Kellermorph, it is tonight's biggest loser. Why? Because a revolver isn't automatic, if that wasn't obvious enough. But Solaris, I hear you say. This is splitting hairs and focusing on needless details. Sadly for you, I'm splitting hairs for a very good reason, and that's naming inconsistency or just flat out phrasing confusion. You'll find it all throughout Warhammer, and given the fact it's been alive since 1987 all the way to 2023 and further, that makes it 36 years old. Technically 37 when this video releases. Mistakes are bound to happen and information changes, swapped around, or retconned. But before we get any further into my tangent, allow me to explain or rather regurgitate how a single action trigger and double action trigger work. Watch this video by Guns of the West for a visual example and from someone who has actually used them. Now, single action triggers work like this. You pull down or cock the external hammer manually, and when it can go no more, you can then pull the trigger. The external hammer then slams into the revolver cylinder and, should there be a round in the cylinder, causes it to fire. If you don't pull the external hammer down all the way and leave it at rest, and then pull the trigger, nothing will happen. I mean, you can stem by pulling the trigger over and over, but it won't do anything until the external hammer itself is cocked. Now, a double action trigger removes that manual need as pulling the trigger cocks the external hammer and then releases it all in one trigger pull. The trigger does two actions at once. You can manually cock the external hammer itself for a more accurate shot, but chances are your revolver isn't meant for longer ranges. And now you know the difference of a single and double action revolver. This does not mean, however, you shouldn't go do your own research. Don't take my word as gospel. I'm simplifying things and skipping over other details for brevity's sake. I'm trying to, anyway. Now, why did I tell you this? Isn't it just the case that the artwork itself is actually showing weird auto pistols? No, it is noted as being a snub-nose revolver, of which a majority are double action triggers. Exceptions exist, of course, but the Kellermorph needs to rename his weapons because that name is a flat-out lie. I could potentially see the argument of it being quote-unquote automatic in the sense of he has 3 of these revolvers, or 2, and that can lay down suppressive fire. But I counter with other weapon choices like an Autogun, for example, and our next example coming up being better suited for the job rather than subscribing to ye old western rootin' tune and by God be shootin'. Speaking of, here are our exceptions. Kind of. The Heavy Stubber. Heavy Stubber is a name given to a range of heavy-barreled autoguns used for sustained fire. Ain't that a kick in the head, huh? You see what I mean by confusing terminology? I might know the difference between a stub and autogun, but there are people out there who don't. Here on out, I'm going to refer to this as a heavy autogun. Now, the heavy autogun comes in 2 varieties, LMG and HMG, light machine gun and heavy machine gun, respectively. Though since this is Warhammer, you'll most often see the heavy machine gun variety more represented, both being carried, mounted, and used for the task of suppressive fire. Not much else to say on it? Well, I guess I could tell you that most heavy autogun designs take inspiration from the M2 Browning, but I'm sure you already knew that to a certain extent. And before one of you gets smart, the Stub-Automatic from the RPG books, made by Fantasy Flight Games, is a semi-automatic pistol. They messed up the phrasing and caused confusion in the RPG books. This video here explains the difference between a single action and double action handgun. Well, I suggest you check it out. The part they messed up is thus. The pistol can fire in both rapid, semi-automatic mode, as well as single shots. Semi-automatic is a single shot only thing, and whilst you can quote rapid fire by pulling the trigger as fast as you can, I wouldn't really classify that as automatic fire. But here's the sticking point some of the more gun enthusiastic viewers might point out. The term automatic itself, in the context of pistols, mind you, mainly refers to the loading mechanism of the pistol. The key thing here is the naming, because when you, viewer, hear automatic, you think of fully automatic fire, which expends multiple rounds in one pull of the trigger, so long as the trigger is kept pulled down or depressed, that is. Whereas semi-automatic fire only expends one round per pull of the trigger itself. Even if you keep the trigger itself pulled down, another round will not come out. You probably didn't know that this distinction exists, which is a very big problem, and could cause many future headaches for yourself, because it is a very important distinction to make. Most stub pistols are semi-automatic, or can be referred to as autoloaders, if you want to be really cool. Whereas the auto pistol can be referred to as a machine pistol. Machine pistol referring to the fact that it is fully automatic. Context and using the correct wording is very important, especially in Warhammer, because wrong information can spread like wildfire. It's why this part was researched and included in this video. But to wrap up this video with some more fun and pizzazz, and not armchair gun autism, let's talk about shotguns. Every variety of shotgun is represented and can be present in Warhammer, from blunderbuss pump action to semi-automatic and fully automatic. Do you know how a shotgun works? Congrats! You know how shotguns work in Warhammer. You can't really mess this up, and I'd be shocked if GW actually did so. If that's it, the video's over, right? It's just that simple? Wrong, because shotguns let me bounce to a point I'd like to make for a server I moderate for because of one question that is innocent yet very consistent. Can firearms as a whole within Warhammer have specialized ammunition loaded? Think incendiary munitions, tracers, and armor-piercing ammunition that you'd be familiar with from video games, and I am here to tell you, yes, it is very much possible. Though I'll only cover shotgun ammo here for brevity's sake. You can have different types of ammunition if the bolter video and its 19 and more specialized rounds wasn't proof enough. Yes, there are more that I didn't list. But having said that, how many different types of shells can the shotgun load, or potentially load? Results may vary because Astartes get their own shotgun, which, bigger usually equates to better sometimes. So, what do we have? Regular scatter shot, which sprays an area with, shot, quote-unquote lead shot to be specific. Executioner rounds, mainly used by the Adeptus Arbites, Judge Dredd wannabes, is a homing round which contains a tiny artificial guidance system within the round itself that allows them to home into whatever target you want, though it has an arming time so is better suited for long-range engagements. Hellfire, which does not set something alight, I know it's confusing, it is an anti-biological round, a vial of acidic toxins that burn flesh and probably eats through flesh, which also affects a person's nervous system. Inferno, which actually sets things alight, an oxyphosphorus gel within the round itself that'll ignite on contact with whatever unlikely soul or object the shooter fires upon. Next up, Gravedigger shells, which are illegally modified rounds primarily popularized by zealots of the Gilead Gravediggers, who, even after, despite being told to knock it off with modifying more rounds and even last packs, they simply ignored both the Departmentum Unitorum and Adeptus Mechanicus, and simply did it anyway. The best known modification of these zealots is the Gravedigger shell. The guardsman removes a bit of shot from the scatter shot, and with that newfound space, puts in some shavings from a compound commonly found in demolition charges and navigation markers. Through this, the round's main purpose turns from being standard scatter shot to a jury-rigged fragmentation round. Next, Enochian prayer shot. It's buckshot, but blessed and holy, made from the remnants of fallen sisters of battle. No, not their bodies, their chaplets or prayer beads. Then it is melted, remade into shot, and placed into its shot shell, and boom! Blessed shotgun rounds effective against demons and their ilk. Worm's Breath is another incendiary munition primarily used by the Death Watch. It is unclear whether mortals are capable of using it, though given the Death Watch's track record and the fact they are Astartes, I am inclined to believe it to be no. Crypt Clearer is another fragmentation round, and again, solely used by the Death Watch. It's bigger, therefore much more effective against any who would dare cross a Space Marine with a shotgun. Overkill on anything smaller than an Eldar, probably meant for killing intelligent elephants. Xenopurge, really creative naming there, is a slug. I think you get the idea, and we'll cut our ammunition naming short. Specialized ammo can be loaded and exists within Warhammer 40,000, and to some extent 30,000. Before I cut things off properly, the Ripper Gun. An Ogryn's best pal and lovely large lady that'll be an Ogryn's best lass. It is a large, automatic shotgun, not a bolter of any kind. I mainly say this because, for once, Dogtide is not the subject of my malice, but instead generative AI. There are a lot of generative AI images that plague Warhammer, and so too does text also factor into this. I have seen factually incorrect info be spouted as true within the setting, and I am here to both warn you and encourage you to do two things. Well, technically three. One, to warn you of the supposed thinking machine and its ilk who preach to know everything. It is illegal for AI to scrape Warhammer as an intellectual property, and even more egregious when people make it come up with bogus, untrue lore. Second, fact check or get somebody you know who is more familiar to research Warhammer lore for you, and double check all the info you get. Yes, this includes me as well. I can't read every book all in the span of a month, let alone all my years on this planet. It's why I give you citations and dedicated page numbers, so you can see that I'm not basing my conclusions and facts off of thin air, and trust me man, it exists, as well as vibes. If someone claims to be an expert in Warhammer lore, they are either lying to you or think far too highly of themselves. This video is proof of that in a way, because though it fails my criteria of being really simple to understand with what needing knowledge of firearms inherently and firearm terminology, I make Warhammer Inquires with the goal of easing the burden on you as a fan of the setting. I wouldn't moderate, teach, and run RPG games in the setting otherwise. I'm hooked and I want you to enjoy the setting just as much as I do. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be critical and purely consume everything without thought. This hobby and setting is expensive and expansive, so be responsible and sensible. Lastly, you'll notice this episode is peskily titled 7A. That's because I am researching other solid projectile weapons, which you can guess will be included in a follow-up episode titled 7B. That, and I am currently working on a think piece, as well as remastering the older videos within Warhammer Inquires itself, which have bad audio, so my plate is busy and filled, just a heads up. So stick around, subscribe with notifications if you're feeling lucky, and we will get back to our normal posting after some much needed tender love and care and short breaks. Remember, Autogun is for automatic firearms or any automatic weapon. Stub-guns refer to semi-automatic firearms. Otherwise, well, it isn't simple at all, but we try our best.